The night Grant Hollowell believed he had everything under control was the same night his entire world began to unravel. Inside Le Bernardin, where polished silver glimmered beneath soft golden light, he leaned back in his chair, wearing the smug smile of a man who thought consequences were for other people. Across from him sat Sloane Mercer, her red dress catching every reflection like she was absorbing the room's attention. Grant lifted his wineglass, whispering something that made Sloane laugh too loudly, too confidently for a woman dining with a married man. He didn't know his pregnant wife, Leah Whitmore, was standing just beyond the frosted partition, one hand pressed to her stomach, the other gripping the strap of her worn leather bag. She hadn't come here to spy. She had come to surprise him. A baby blanket she'd spent weeks embroidering rested inside her bag, wrapped with a blue ribbon. Tonight was supposed to be a moment of reconnection. Instead, her world cracked apart in a single breath. Grant reached across the table, brushing Sloane's fingers as if the gesture were nothing except the final confirmation that everything Leah had been sensing for months was real. Her knees weakened, her throat tightened, yet she remained silent. She didn't step forward, she didn't confront, she didn't cry. She simply turned away. Outside, Manhattan's night air was sharp, slicing through the warmth of the restaurant. Leah walked quickly, her heart pounding with the weight of betrayal and the child she carried. She didn't know where she was going. She only knew she couldn't go home, not to the penthouse where Grant had promised her forever. What she didn't see was Grant glancing toward the entrance minutes later, his smile fading, a flicker of unease tightening his jaw. A feeling he couldn't explain, a shift he couldn't name. He didn't yet know his wife was gone. He didn't yet know what she'd take with her. He didn't yet know how much he was about to lose. Leah Whitmore had always imagined that if her marriage ever ended, it would be loud shouting, slammed doors, broken glass, something dramatic enough to match the pain. But the truth was quieter, much quieter. When she stepped into the penthouse on East 57th Street that night, the silence felt unnatural, as if the walls themselves were holding their breath. The soft glow from the floor-to-ceiling windows cast long reflections across the polished hardwood floors. Everything looked exactly as she had left it that morning. Grant's Mont Blanc pen beside his MacBook Pro, his cufflinks still on the marble counter, the half-empty bottle of sparkling water she'd opened before her prenatal vitamins. Ordinary, yet nothing felt ordinary anymore. Leah closed the door gently behind her. She didn't bother turning on the lights. She stood there for a moment, hand resting on her belly, listening to the faint hum of the city below. Her baby shifted lightly, as if sensing the storm in her chest. She whispered, "I'm sorry you saw that tonight. I'm so sorry." Then she moved. Not with panic, not with hesitation, but with a strange, steady clarity she didn't know she possessed. She pulled out a small suitcase from under the bed, a carry-on she once used for weekend trips with Grant, back when they were still building dreams, instead of surviving disappointments. She packed only essentials, a few clothes, her prenatal vitamins, a sketchbook, the baby blanket she'd embroidered, still tied with the same blue ribbon. Her hands shook when she placed it inside. That was the only moment she almost broke. Next were her documents, passport, medical reports, insurance cards, and then she paused in front of the dresser. Her wedding ring glimmered softly under the ambient city light. For years, she had worn it like a shield, a promise, a home. Now it felt like a weight. Leah slid it off. Her finger felt suddenly lighter, strangely exposed. She placed the ring on the kitchen counter beside Grant's fountain pen, aligning it perfectly as if symmetry could soften the blow. She pulled a notepad from the drawer. Wrote only 9 words. "You chose this. I choose freedom for me and him. No anger, no accusations, just truth." She left the note in the center of the marble island, where Grant would see it the moment he walked in. With one last look at the life she had tried desperately to protect, Leah zipped her suitcase and walked toward the private elevator. The doors slid shut behind her with a soft metallic thud, the sound of a woman leaving everything except her future. Grant Hollowell returned to the penthouse just past midnight, still carrying the smug satisfaction of a man convinced he was untouchable. The city lights shimmered against the glass towers, reflecting his confidence back at him as he stepped out of the elevator. He loosened his tie, humming, replaying the way Sloane had laughed at every line he delivered. Tonight had been perfect, clean, quiet, without risk. Leah was supposed to be asleep, exhausted from her 3rd trimester fatigue. Everything had been calculated, controlled. But the moment he walked inside, he knew something was wrong. The penthouse was too still. Normally, the soft hum of a diffuser or the faint clatter of dishes Leah forgot to put away greeted him. But tonight, the silence felt thick, unnatural, stretching across the living room like a warning. "Leah?" he called out, expecting her voice from the bedroom. Nothing. He walked farther in, his confidence evaporating with each step. Then he saw the ring. Her wedding ring. It sat beside his Montblanc pen like a tiny, glittering accusation. His chest tightened. What the hell? His eyes scanned the room. Her coat was gone. Her shoes, the tote bag she always kept by the door. Something inside him twisted, sharp, and cold. He moved quickly now, checking the bedroom, her dresser drawers half open, clothes missing. The bathroom, her skincare bottles gone. The closet, empty hangers dangling like stripped bones. A tremor of panic hit him. This wasn't a tantrum. This wasn't one of her quiet sulks. This was deliberate. He rushed back to the kitchen, fingers trembling as he grabbed the note from the counter. 9 words. Just 9. They sliced through his composure like a blade. "You chose this. I choose freedom for me and him. Him. His son. His legacy." Grant felt the blood drain from his face. No. No, 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 she wouldn't leave. She wouldn't dare. He pulled out his phone immediately. Called her. Straight to voicemail. Again. The automated voice felt like a taunt. The panic deepened, pressing against his ribs. He texted her. "Where are you? Pick up. This isn't funny. Come home now." No response. He slammed the phone onto the counter, pacing, chest heaving. Losing Leah wasn't the fear. Losing control was. Losing his spotless image as Sterling and Crane's shining executive. Losing the child he planned to parade for social capital. Losing the wife he assumed would always stay quiet. Because if Leah was gone, she could expose everything. Grant gripped the counter, knuckles white, breath shaking. The first cracks of real fear showed in his eyes. He wasn't in control anymore, and for the first time, he knew it. Leah didn't look back when the elevator doors opened into the quiet lobby. Her suitcase wheels echoed sharply against the marble floor. Every click, a reminder that she was crossing a line she could never return from. The doorman, who'd known her for years, stood as if to greet her, but one look at her pale face and trembling hands stopped him cold. He simply nodded, a silent gesture of respect or pity, she couldn't tell. Outside, the Manhattan night wrapped around her like a cold warning. It was nearly 1:30 a.m., the kind of hour when the city thinned, when only taxis, night shift workers, and broken hearts moved through the streets. Leah hugged her coat tighter around her swollen belly and stepped toward the curb. A yellow cab slowed immediately. She climbed in, her breath shaky. "Where to?" the driver asked. She paused. She'd had a home her entire adult life. Now she had nowhere. Finally, she whispered, "Brooklyn Bridge. The pedestrian entrance. With Holliber. And Wunber." The driver blinked at her through the mirror, confusion flickering before he nodded and pulled into traffic. As the cab moved through Midtown, the neon lights blurred behind her eyes. Grant's voice, smooth, confident, dismissive, echoed in her head. His lies, his excuses, his indifference. But what cut deepest was the knowledge that he had never once imagined she would leave. The bridge appeared in the distance, its cables illuminated like a crown against the sky. When the taxi stopped, she stepped out into the cold air. Her breath fogged as she exhaled. She felt small yet strangely weightless. Gripping her suitcase, Leah began walking up the wooden planks of the Brooklyn Bridge. Her footsteps thudded softly, swallowed by the wind. Down below, the East River shimmered with the reflections of a city that didn't know her pain or didn't care. Halfway across, she stopped. The wind tugged at her hair, carrying the scent of water and distant rain. She placed both hands on her belly. "We're okay," she whispered, though her voice broke. "We're going to be okay." Her baby kicked gently, as if answering. Emotion surged through her: fear, grief, but also something else: resolve. This bridge wasn't just an escape route, it was a threshold. A crossing between the life she had endured and the life she would fight for. She didn't know what waited in Brooklyn. She didn't know who she could trust. But she knew this. She would rather walk into the unknown than remain in a home built on lies. And somewhere across the river, a man who believed he owned her fate was about to learn the truth. Leah Whitmore was no longer under his control. By the time Leah reached the Brooklyn side of the bridge, her legs ached, her breath trembled, and a stab of pain rippled across her lower abdomen, a warning her doctor had given her about overexertion during the third trimester. She steadied herself against a lamppost, forcing slow breaths. She couldn't collapse now, not tonight, not with everything at stake. A rideshare pulled up after she'd waited several minutes, her fingers numb from the cold. She gave the driver an address she hadn't used in years, a loft in Tribeca that belonged to someone she once trusted more than almost anyone. Rowan Hale. The building was quiet when she arrived, the kind of quiet that came from polished concrete, original brick walls, and thick security doors. She hesitated before pressing the buzzer. Would he even remember her? Would he care? It had been nearly a decade since their lives went separate ways. The speaker crackled. "Hello?" His voice, deeper now, steadier, hit her like a memory she didn't know she still carried. "Rowan, it's Leah." A pause, sharp intake of breath. Then the lock clicked. "Come up." Inside, the elevator opened directly into his loft. Warm light spilled across wide windows, overlooking Franklin Street. A half-finished sculpture sat on a workbench beside an open MacBook Pro and a steaming mug of coffee, untouched long enough to cool. Rowan stepped forward, barefoot, hair tousled, wearing an old gray t-shirt, but his eyes, those steady hazel eyes, focused instantly on her swollen stomach, her trembling hands, her exhausted face. "Leah." His voice softened to something almost broken. "What happened?" The moment she tried to answer, her breath hitched. Tears she had choked back all night finally slipped free. Rowan didn't press for details. He didn't ask intrusive questions. He simply reached for her suitcase, set it aside, and guided her to the couch with the gentleness of a man handling something sacred. "Sit, I'll get you water. Do you need to call your doctor? Are you in pain?" She shook her head, wiping tears. I had nowhere else to go." Rowan knelt in front of her, not beside, not across in front, eye level, grounding her. "You're safe here, Leah. Whatever happened, you're safe now." For the first time since discovering Grant's betrayal, her lungs expanded fully. The panic eased. The room felt warm, safe, in a way she hadn't felt in years. She didn't know Rowan's life had changed in unimaginable ways since they last spoke. She didn't know who he had become. She didn't know how deeply he still cared. But she would. And her arrival tonight would alter all three of their lives forever. Grant Hollowell was pacing the penthouse like a man possessed. The city glittered outside the windows, but inside, panic clawed at him until his breath came in sharp, uneven bursts. Leah was gone. Her ring was gone. Her note was gone. And the longer she stayed silent, the more dangerous this became for him. He grabbed his phone again and dialed her number. Straight to voicemail. He cursed under his breath, slamming the phone onto the marble counter. He wasn't used to being ignored, especially not by his wife, the woman he had molded into someone predictable, obedient, quiet. "Not like this," he muttered. "She doesn't walk out. She wouldn't." But she had. And that terrified him more than he wanted to admit. He opened his laptop and began typing rapidly. Damage control, that was step one. Leah couldn't be allowed to tell anyone what she saw tonight. Not colleagues, not friends, not the press. His reputation at Sterling and Crane was built on the illusion of a stable home life, clean values, leadership. A pregnant wife vanishing in the middle of the night? That was the kind of scandal that could cost him partnerships, investors, and the promotion he was weeks away from securing. He drafted an email to HR first. "Leah has been struggling emotionally due to her pregnancy. Unstable behavior. Please respect our privacy if she reaches out." He paused, choosing his words carefully, constructing a narrative that painted Leah as overwhelmed, fragile, unpredictable. The kind of woman who might disappear on impulse. The kind of woman no one should take seriously. It made him sick how easily the lies flowed, but he justified each one. This was survival. When his phone buzzed, he lunged for it, hoping it was Leah. Instead, it was Sloane. Did she find out? "Call me." Grant stared at the message, jaw tightening. He didn't need her panic on top of his own. He typed back, "I'm handling it. Don't contact me tonight." Handling it. As if he had any control left. He poured himself a drink scotch, 2 fingers, neat and swallowed hard. His reflection in the glass cabinet looked older, more desperate. He hated it. "Get it together," he growled. Find her before she ruins everything. He didn't care about Leah's feelings. He cared about leverage, optics, reputation. And he knew something with cold certainty. A woman walking away was not nearly as dangerous as a woman who finally understood her worth. If Leah had reached that point, he was in far more trouble than he realized. Leah didn't remember falling asleep. Exhaustion had pulled her under the moment Rowan offered her the couch, a blanket, and a glass of water she barely touched. When she finally woke, the loft was dim, except for the warm glow of a single lamp on the side table. For a moment, she didn't know where she was. The unfamiliar ceiling, the exposed brick walls, the distant hum of Franklin Street, it all blended into a haze. But then her baby shifted inside her, gently reminding her of the night she had survived. The betrayal she had witnessed, the life she had walked away from, the weight of it all crashed into her. Leah covered her face with both hands as the first sob escaped, sudden and sharp. She tried to muffle it, but once the dam cracked, everything burst. Her inhale hitched, her chest tightening, tears spilling hot and relentless. Months of holding her breath, of pretending everything was normal, collapsed into a single moment of raw, unbearable release. She cried for the woman she used to be. She cried for the child she needed to protect. She cried for the love she thought she had, the marriage she tried to fix alone, the nights she lay awake wondering what she had done wrong. And she cried because she finally understood. Grant had never planned to choose her. The sound must have traveled, because Rowan appeared quietly from the hallway. He didn't turn on any harsh lights. He didn't rush toward her or smother her with questions. He simply approached slowly and knelt beside the couch, his expression soft with a concern she hadn't seen from anyone in a long time. "Leah," he said gently, "you don't have to hold it together right now." That made her cry harder. She pressed her palms to her eyes, embarrassed. "I'm sorry," she choked. "I didn't mean to wake you. Everything hurts." Rowan reached for a box of tissues, placing them beside her without forcing them into her hands. "You have every right to break down," he murmured. "You've been carrying too much alone." His voice wasn't pitying, it wasn't patronizing, it was steady, human, real. Leah wiped her cheeks, breath trembling, vision blurry. "I don't know what to do next," she whispered. "I don't even know where I belong now." Rowan's eyes held hers, unwavering. "You belong somewhere, you're safe. And until you find that place—" He paused, choosing his words with care. "You have this one." 8. For the first time in months, Leah felt the smallest flicker of something warm. The possibility that she wasn't as alone as she thought. While Leah lay curled on Rowan's couch, breath finally evening after hours of quiet tears, another part of Manhattan pulsed with a different kind of desperation, one wrapped in perfume, ambition, and a dangerously fragile sense of victory. Sloane Mercer stood in front of her bathroom mirror, reapplying lipstick with the precision of a surgeon. She wasn't shaken, not yet. But the unease in Grant's last message, short, clipped, unlike his usual arrogant calm, knotted her stomach. "I'm handling it. Don't contact me tonight." Handling what? The plan was supposed to be simple. Grant would slowly detach from his dull, overly emotional wife, secure his promotion, and make his relationship with Sloane public once the optics were safe. Sloane had invested too much into him to let Leah ruin everything now. She paced the length of her apartment, heels clicking against the hardwood. If Leah had seen them together at Le Bernardin, if Grant had panicked, if the wife decided to make noise, Sloane clenched her jaw. She couldn't allow that. Women like Leah always made things messy, crying, pleading, clinging to vows that expired years ago. But Sloane wasn't sentimental. She was strategic. And she knew one thing Grant never understood. Power belonged to whoever controlled the story. She grabbed her phone and opened a private chat with a contact labeled only M. A media intern. Young, impressionable, desperate to impress someone important. Need a favor. Quietly, someone might be unstable, could be a story soon. She didn't name names. She didn't have to. Seeds only needed water, not direction. Then she texted Grant again, though he told her not to. "If she really left, you need to get ahead of this. I can help craft a statement." Something about her stress, maybe prenatal depression, trust me. It didn't bother her to weaponize another woman's pregnancy. In her world, vulnerability was either a tool or a trap. Leah had chosen wrong. Sloane's reflection smirked back at her polished, poised, predatory. "This isn't slipping away," she murmured. "You don't get to ruin what I built." But deep beneath her confidence, a flicker of fear stirred. Grant wasn't answering, and if he lost control, if he spiraled, her entire future could evaporate. So she made a final decision, one born not of loyalty, but self-preservation. She grabbed her coat, smoothed her hair, and headed for Grant's penthouse. If Leah was gone, Sloane intended to step into the space immediately, publicly, permanently. She didn't know that Grant's world was already cracking. She didn't know Leah was no longer alone. She didn't know Rowan Hale existed. But she would, and the truth would destroy her carefully curated empire. Sunlight crept slowly across the wide loft windows, brushing against Leah's eyelids before she was ready to wake. For a moment, she forgot where she was. The soft couch beneath her, the faint scent of coffee drifting from the kitchen, the quiet hum of Franklin Street below it, all felt unfamiliar yet strangely gentle. Then everything came flooding back. The restaurant, the betrayal, the bridge, Rowan. Her chest tightened, but the ache wasn't as suffocating as the night before. She shifted carefully, one hand instinctively covering her belly. Her baby responded with a light flutter, as if reminding her they were both still here, still fighting. A soft clatter sounded from the kitchen. Leah pushed herself upright, smoothing her tangled hair. Rowan stood by the counter, sleeves rolled up, pouring freshly brewed coffee into 2 mugs. He looked up the moment he sensed movement. "Morning," he said, voice low but warm. "Did you sleep at all?" "Yes, more than I expected." She hesitated. "I'm sorry for last night." "Don't be." Rowan approached with a careful step, handing her a steaming mug, not coffee, but a Starbucks-branded herbal tea he must have ordered earlier. Chamomile, her favorite, he remembered. The realization made her eyes burn again. She blinked it away. "You don't have to take care of me," she whispered. "I know," Rowan replied gently, "but I want to make sure you're not carrying this alone. Not anymore." She didn't know how to respond to that, not when kindness felt foreign after months of emotional erosion. She sipped her tea, letting the warmth settle in her chest. Rowan sat across from her, elbows resting loosely on his knees. "You don't have to tell me everything today. But I need to know. Does he know where you are?" Leah shook her head, fear flickering. "No, but Grant won't stop looking. He doesn't handle losing control well." Rowan's jaw tightened, a subtle flash of protectiveness crossing his face. "Then he won't find you here." Something in his voice, steady, grounded, almost unshakable, made her inhale deeply for the first time in days. "I have an appointment later," she murmured. "A prenatal checkup. I was supposed to go with him." "Then you're going with me," Rowan said without hesitation. The certainty in his tone startled her, softened her, steadied her. Outside the window, sunlight finally broke fully over the buildings, spilling warm gold across her face. For the first time since her world shattered, Leah felt the faint outline of a new path forming, one she didn't choose alone. And far across Manhattan, Grant Hollowell had no idea his grip on her life was already beginning to slip. Grant Hollowell walked into Sterling & Crane the next morning in a tailored navy suit, polished shoes, and a smile he crafted like armor. Image was everything. Optics were everything. If he pretended nothing was wrong, then nothing was wrong, at least to everyone watching. But the cracks were already forming. The receptionist glanced up at him with an expression he couldn't read, curiosity, maybe concern. 2 analysts passing by lowered their voices the moment he stepped into the hallway. Grant's stomach tightened, though he refused to acknowledge why. He simply adjusted his tie and strode toward the executive floor. Inside the conference room, the weekly partners meeting buzzed with low chatter. Grant slipped into his seat, ready to perform. But then he noticed something that made his pulse flicker. Sloane wasn't in her usual spot outside, preparing materials. She was nowhere, and people were whispering about him. He caught fragments. Wife. Late night. Didn't look good. His jaw locked. Someone must have seen him at Le Bernardin. Or worse, someone had seen Leah. The image of her walking in that night made his chest twist unpleasantly. Before he could reassert control, the CEO, Roland Crane, entered the room. His gaze swept the table, pausing a fraction too long on Grant, something cold, unreadable. Grant hated that look. "We'll begin," Crane announced. "But first, a brief note." Grant felt the shift before the words even landed. There have been conversations circulating about one of our executives' personal matters. I will remind everyone that conduct inside and outside this building affects this firm. A few people glanced directly at Grant. He forced a confident smirk, but his palms were damp. Crane continued, "If anyone's private situation becomes a liability, we will address it accordingly." It wasn't subtle. It wasn't meant to be. Grant swallowed hard. His promotion, his reputation, everything he'd built, they were suddenly on unstable ground. Then came the final hit. During the meeting, his phone vibrated once. A message from Sloan. "We need to talk. Someone recognized us last night." Grant's vision narrowed. Of all nights, of all restaurants. He typed back sharply, "Stay quiet. Do not mention Leah." But when he glanced up, he found two associates watching him closely, whispering again. The room felt smaller, hotter. He'd always controlled the narrative. But now, for the first time, he felt it slipping through his fingers. If Leah talked, if anyone believed her, his entire world could collapse. And what he didn't know, what terrified him more than he could admit, was that Leah wasn't alone anymore. Her silence wasn't weakness. It was preparation. By late afternoon, Leah felt strong enough physically, at least to sit upright without her pulse racing. Rowan had insisted she rest, but the appointment reminder on her phone blinked insistently. Missing prenatal checkups wasn't an option, no matter how shattered her world felt. When Rowan emerged from his home office, jacket in hand, she blinked in confusion. "You're leaving?" He shook his head. "I'm taking you to your appointment." She opened her mouth to protest. "Rowan, you don't have to." "Yes," he said gently but firmly, "I do." His tone wasn't forceful, but grounded. Clear. A boundary, not a rescue. It surprised her how safe that felt. He wasn't trying to take over. He was simply showing up. Something Grant hadn't done in months. Rowan grabbed his keys and held the door for her. "We're going in my car. The Uber surge is insane right now." A subtle joke. She managed a small smile. Outside, his Mercedes S-Class waited at the curb, understated and elegant. Not flashy. Grant had always chased flashy but quietly powerful. Leah settled into the soft leather seat, letting out a breath she didn't know she'd been holding. The drive to the clinic on 67th Street was quiet, except for the soft hum of the engine and the occasional honk from impatient Manhattan traffic. Rowan didn't bombard her with questions. He didn't pry. He simply asked one thing. "When was the last time you felt safe?" The question stunned her. Not because she didn't know the answer, but because no one had ever cared enough to ask. "I don't remember," she whispered. Rowan nodded, eyes fixed on the road. "Then let's start small. You're safe right now, with me. Just for the time you need." The simple truth of it eased something deep in her chest. At the clinic, he waited outside the exam room, hands in pockets, pacing slowly but respectfully. When the doctor called him in at Leah's request, he entered quietly. The ultrasound screen glowed blue, displaying a tiny heartbeat flickering steadily. Leah watched Rowan instead of the monitor. His expression softened, something warm and protective, brightening his features. "He's strong," Rowan said softly, meeting her eyes. "Like his mother." Her throat tightened. No one had ever said something like that to her, not without expectation, not without agenda. As they left the clinic, the early evening sky stretched across Manhattan in shades of gold and rose. Rowan opened the car door for her. "Leah," he said gently, "I'm here to help, but only if you want me here. You get to choose that." Choice. Her choice? Something she'd been denied for far too long. For the first time, Leah felt the shape of a future she could control, and it terrified Grant Hollowell more than he could ever imagine. By the next morning, the walls around Sterling and Crane felt tighter, sharper, almost hostile. Whispers had spread beyond the executive floor, slipping into cubicles, lounges, even the elevator ride. And for the first time in years, Grant Hollowell could feel the shift not toward him, but against him. It started with a single photo. A junior analyst had spotted him at Le Bernardin the night before, leaning entirely too close to Sloan Mercer. The blurry picture made its way into a private group chat among employees, and from there, into the company's internal rumor mill, where stories evolved faster than truth. Now, the image wasn't blurry. Now, it wasn't speculation. It was a spark. And the whole company was dry timber. When Grant stepped off the elevator at 8:32 a.m., conversations died instantly. People turned away or pretended to scroll through their phones. A few didn't bother hiding their stares. He forced a smile, the charm he used to rely on. Morning. No one answered. Inside his office, his assistant, Mara, hovered anxiously near her desk. Normally composed, today she couldn't meet his eyes. "Is there something you need to tell me?" he asked flatly. She swallowed. "Mr. Crane wants to see you, right away." Grant stiffened. "About what?" Her gaze darted toward her monitor, where a tab quickly disappeared. "I think you already know." He didn't. He feared he did. He entered the CEO's office with a confidence he didn't feel. Roland Crane didn't offer him a seat. Not a good sign. "Grant," Crane began, voice even but razor sharp. "Sterling leadership requires stability, optics, reliability." "My work speaks for itself," Grant argued. "It used to." Crane turned his monitor. The photo filled the screen, Grant's hand brushing Sloane's arm. Sloane leaning in, both smiling in a way no executive should, at a fine dining restaurant with someone who wasn't his pregnant wife. Grant's veins iced. "This is nothing," he lied. "A private dinner." Misinterpreted. Crane studied him, unimpressed. "Your wife is 7 months pregnant. She hasn't been seen with you in weeks. And now this appears. Rishan, 19. Grant opened his mouth, but Crane continued firmer. "If your domestic life becomes a liability to this firm, we will have to reconsider your position and your pending promotion." The words landed like blows. Grant stepped closer, lowering his voice. "I can manage the situation." "You'd better." Crane closed the file, because right now, the situation is managing you. Grant walked out, mask cracking, pulse thundering. He needed to find Leah. Silence was killing him. What he didn't know was that Leah wasn't hiding. She was healing. And every moment she stayed gone, the empire he thought untouchable was starting to fracture. The next afternoon, Rowan suggested they take a short walk through Soho. Leah hesitated at first, but the loft walls felt too close, too heavy, and she needed air. Real air. Not the recycled, nervous breaths she'd been taking for days. The streets buzzed softly with weekend energy as they strolled past boutiques and art-filled windows. It was familiar ground for her. She had spent years restoring paintings in a gallery just a few blocks from here. Back when life felt hopeful. Back when she still believed Grant's promises. Rowan slowed in front of Marwick and Sons Gallery, its warm lights glowing through the glass facade. "They're showcasing local artists today," he said quietly. "Want to step in for a minute?" She didn't answer with words. She simply nodded, surprising herself. Inside, the gallery smelled of linseed oil and varnished wood, comforting scents she'd always associated with possibility. Leah trailed her fingers along a display case, her eyes catching on a small, ethereal watercolor. The brushwork was delicate, emotional, unmistakable. Her own. A gasp escaped her. She hadn't seen this piece in years. She'd painted it before she married Grant, back when she still believed her art could mean something. Before she let him nudge her away from it with comments like, "Cute hobby, Leah, but you don't need to work anymore." The gallery owner approached with a warm smile. "Beautiful, isn't it?" The artist had incredible sensitivity. "We've had several inquiries about acquiring it." Leah blinked, stunned. "Someone wants to buy it?" Several someones. Emotion tightened her throat. She couldn't remember the last time Grant had complimented anything she created. He didn't understand her work. He never tried. She had given up her dreams for a man who couldn't be bothered to see them. Rowan watched her silently, reading every shift in her expression. "You didn't tell me you'd exhibit it here." "I didn't think it mattered," she whispered. "Well," he said softly, stepping beside her, "it clearly did. To people who actually see you." The words hit deeper than she expected. For months, maybe years, Leah had felt like she was shrinking inside her own life, her own marriage. Grant didn't just cheat, he erased her. Bit by bit, smile by smile, choice by choice. Standing in that gallery, surrounded by brushstrokes she once believed in, she felt the truth settle over her like a trembling revelation. Grant had never loved the real her, only the version he could control. Her baby kicked then, a small, firm reminder that she wasn't alone anymore, that she had something worth rebuilding her life around. And for the first time, Leah didn't feel broken. She felt returning. While Leah was rediscovering pieces of herself in Soho, across Manhattan, Sloane Mercer sat in the dim office she shared with her PR team, scrolling furiously through her phone. Grant still hadn't responded to her last message. And worse, every attempt she'd made to shape the narrative inside Sterling and Crane had been met with cold, suspicious silence. People were watching her now, whispering, connecting dots she hadn't authorized anyone to connect. Her instincts screamed at her. Find out who's helping Leah. So she dug. Sloane prided herself on having a talent for secrets, knowing them, using them, burying them. And when she traced Leah's last known financial activity through a mutual acquaintance in banking, she found a small but telling detail. A charge for a rideshare ending near Franklin Street, Tribeca. Sloane smirked. Found you. She typed the address into an internal directory database, one restricted to senior staff. The name that came up made her freeze. Rowan Hale. Her heart stuttered. No, 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 this was impossible. Rowan Hale wasn't some everyday acquaintance Leah happened to know. He was the Hale heir, the silent owner of Hale Media Group, which controlled 3 major newspapers, including the one Sterling and Crane relied on for investor relations. And the most dangerous part? He'd kept his power hidden for years, pretending to be nothing more than a low-profile attorney and patron of the arts. Sloane's mind spun. If Leah was with Rowan, Grant wasn't just in trouble. Grant was finished. The promotion he worshipped? Gone. His career? Gone. His reputation? One headline away from ruin. A slow, wicked thought began forming in Sloane's mind. If she played this right, if she distanced herself at the perfect moment, she might not only save herself, she could replace him. But first, she needed to know how close Rowan and Leah really were. She opened social media archives, hunting for any trace of their past. Then she found it. A photo from years ago, Rowan and Leah at a university art gala, smiling at each other with a softness that couldn't be faked. A past relationship, a powerful man, a pregnant woman he clearly once cared for. Sloane's stomach tightened. This wasn't an affair scandal anymore. It was a war she hadn't realized she'd entered. And she had just discovered that the woman she dismissed as fragile was being protected by someone far more dangerous than Grant Hollowell ever could be. She whispered to herself, pale now, "Oh, Leah, what have you stepped into?" But the real question, the one Sloane should have asked, was, what has she stepped into? Because Rowan Hale had already noticed her digging, and he wasn't known for mercy. Grant Hollowell had always believed he was the kind of man who could bend the world to his will. But by the end of the week, even he could feel his grip loosening. His reflection in the penthouse windows looked unfamiliar. Eyes bloodshot, jaw tight, hair disheveled from running his hands through it too many times. Leah's silence had gone from irritating to unsettling to terrifying. And the company? Slipping through his fingers. He sat at his dining table with a drink he didn't taste, scrolling through internal messages he wasn't meant to see. Rumors. Speculation. Whispers that he was unstable or losing focus. Someone had even suggested postponing his promotion vote. He slammed the glass down hard enough to crack it. Who's spreading this? He suspected Sloane at first, loyal until threatened. But no, she was too smart to sabotage herself. Then he saw it. A forwarded email mentioning a powerful outside influence asking questions about him. A name floated through his mind, uninvited. Rowan Hale. A name he hadn't heard in a decade. A name Leah had once spoken with softness. His stomach soured. Leah couldn't be with him. She wouldn't dare. His phone buzzed. Sloane, again. Grant, we need to talk about the photo. And about Leah? He ignored the message. He couldn't deal with her panic tonight. He needed answers. After pacing the penthouse for the 5th time, he opened Leah's laptop, the one she rarely used and never locked. In her email drafts was something that made his vision blur with rage. A message she had written days before leaving, but never sent. Subject line, I need help. Recipient, Rowan Hale. Oh no, Grant whispered, breath trembling. Oh, that little... He grabbed his coat and stormed out of the penthouse. The elevator felt too slow. The city streets felt too loud. His pulse hammered in his ears as he drove, ignoring red lights, his Tesla weaving recklessly through Manhattan traffic. If Leah was with Rowan, if she dared make him the villain publicly, he could lose everything he'd built. His career, his image, his future. He arrived at the office after hours, swiping himself inside. He tore through HR files, through compliance logs, desperate to find something, anything he could use to regain control. Something to turn the narrative back on Leah. Instead, he found a sealed report with his name on it. Unauthorized spending, misallocated funds. A whistleblower complaint. His knees nearly buckled. This wasn't Leah. This wasn't Sloan. This was the company preparing to cut him loose. Breath shaking, he whispered, "No, this isn't happening. This isn't happening." But it was. For the first time in his life, Grant Hollowell wasn't the hunter. He was the one being hunted. The day after Grant's world started cracking, Leah woke to a rare, unfamiliar feeling. Stillness. Not fear, not panic, just stillness. The kind that follows a storm but precedes a new beginning. Rowan had stepped out for a morning meeting, leaving a handwritten note on the kitchen counter beside a fresh herbal tea. Take your time. You don't have to rush healing. No one had ever spoken to her that way. No one had ever given her permission to rest. She sipped the tea slowly, letting warmth settle into places she didn't know were cold. Then her eyes drifted toward a corner of the loft, the corner she had intentionally ignored until now. It held a canvas, blank and waiting. A set of brushes in a jar. A tray of watercolor pans she recognized instantly. Rowan had placed them there. Quietly, without expectation. Leah approached the canvas as though it were something sacred. She touched its surface lightly, her fingers trembling. She hadn't painted since the early months of her marriage, before Grant convinced her there was no future in it, before she traded her dreams for stability that was never real. Painting had once been her voice, her freedom. Grant had silenced both. But here, in this quiet Tribeca loft, surrounded by the soft hum of city life, she felt something flicker inside her chest. A small pulse of who she used to be. She dipped a brush into the water. Her breath slowed. Her shoulders loosened. The first stroke of color landed gently on the canvas, then another, and another. Shapes formed, not perfect, not planned, but honest. She painted the Brooklyn Bridge from memory, but not the bridge she had walked across in fear. She painted the version where dawn broke behind it, gold, soft, full of possibility. Color returned to her fingertips. Strength returned to her breath. And hope returned to her heart. She didn't hear Rowan come back until he stood quietly behind her. "You remember how to breathe when you paint," he said softly. She didn't turn around, but a smile touched her lips. "I forgot what it felt like." "No," he replied gently, stepping closer but not touching her. "Someone made you forget. That's different." The words hit deep because they were true. Leah lowered her brush, exhaling shakily. "Rowan, I don't know who I'm becoming," he answered without hesitation. "Someone stronger than before." End quote, end quote. She blinked back sudden tears, but they weren't from pain this time. They were from recognition. For the first time since her marriage began to erode, Leah wasn't losing herself. She was finding herself again. Grant Hollowell hadn't slept. Not really. He had only paced through the penthouse, through the edges of his unraveling mind, through every possible scenario of where Leah could be hiding. Each hour she stayed gone was another crack in his empire. Another threat to the image he'd built, brick by fraudulent brick. By sunrise, his desperation sharpened into something darker. He needed to find her. He needed control back. He began with the obvious, her friends. Most of them ignored him. A few answered with cold civility, claiming they hadn't seen her in months true, thanks to the isolation Grant had orchestrated. Then he searched her phone records, her emails, her financial statements, every trace he had access to. Nothing. Leah had vanished cleanly, which infuriated him. She wasn't clever enough to pull this off alone. Someone was helping her. He scrolled through Leah's gallery contacts, pausing at names she'd once mentioned. His gaze froze when he saw one entry buried in her old emails. Rowan Hale. The name struck him like a blow. He remembered Rowan vaguely. A quiet, driven man who'd once circled Leah during their college years. Grant had dismissed him back then as unimportant, someone who would never pose a threat. But now Rowan Hale was everywhere. In Leah's unsent email. In internal Sterling and Crane whisper networks. And according to a quick search in a database, Grant wasn't supposed to access at an address in Tribeca. The realization hit him like a drug. She was with him. She ran to him. Unbelievable, Grant muttered, fury rising from his chest like smoke. She thinks he can protect her? Without thinking, he grabbed his keys and stormed out, practically throwing himself into the Tesla. His mind raced faster than the car tearing through morning Manhattan traffic. He pictured Leah in Rowan's loft crying, fragile, telling her sob story to an old flame who'd always looked at her too softly. Grant's hands tightened around the steering wheel. Leah belonged to him. She was his wife, carrying his child under his roof. And she dared run. She dared hide. She dared make him look weak. As the skyline shifted, as Tribeca drew closer, his anger bloomed into something dangerous. He parked illegally, barely noticing the ticket officer shouting after him. His pulse roared in his ears as he stared up at Rowan's building, sleek, modern, expensive. Too expensive for an attorney, too quiet for someone ordinary. Grant didn't know Rowan's true power yet. He didn't know this was the last place he should ever walk into. He didn't know his arrival would trigger consequences he couldn't escape. He only knew one thing. Leah was inside and he was going to get her back. Grant didn't knock. He slammed his fist against Rowan Hale's loft door so hard the metal frame rattled. Inside, Leah flinched, her brush dropping onto the floor. Rowan rose immediately from the kitchen island, eyes sharpening into something cold and alert. The second knock wasn't a knock, it was a threat. Rowan stepped toward the door. "Stay here," he murmured to Leah. But she grabbed his sleeve, breath trembling. "He'll hurt you. You don't know what he's like when he's angry." Rowan turned to her, voice steady. "Leah, he's not getting near you." On the third hit, Rowan opened the door. Grant stumbled inside with a fury that filled the room like smoke. His eyes were wild, his movements sharp, his breath shallow with rage. "You," he growled, pointing at Rowan. "Where is she?" Rowan didn't move. Didn't blink. "Lower your voice." Grant shoved past him and froze. Leah stood behind the couch, one hand on her stomach, the other bracing herself on the armrest. She looked smaller than he remembered, yet somehow stronger. Her eyes were no longer pleading. They were calm, resolute. "Leah," Grant exhaled, the rage shifting into something manipulative, familiar. "Baby, thank God. I've been worried sick." "And well through." Rowan stepped between them so smoothly it looked effortless. "Don't call her that," Grant snapped. "This is my wife. Move." "No," Rowan said simply. Something inside Grant broke. He reached forward, grabbing Rowan's shirt, but Rowan caught his wrist midair, grip firm, unyielding, not violent, but immovable. "Let go," Rowan warned quietly. Grant jerked back, humiliated. "You think you can hide her from me? You think you can keep my child from me?" Leah inhaled sharply. "Our child doesn't need a father who cheats, lies, and manipulates." Grant's head whipped toward her. "You ungrateful." Rowan's voice cut through the room like steel. "Choose your next words carefully." Grant glared between them, chest heaving. "You're making a mistake, Leah. You can't leave me. You have nothing without me." Leah straightened, shoulders trembling but firm. "I have peace without you. That's more than you ever gave me." Grant stepped forward. Rowan blocked him instantly. "You need to leave. Now." Grant's laugh was sharp, unhinged. "You think this is over? I'm going to destroy both of you." He stormed out, slamming the door so hard the frame shook. Leah collapsed onto the couch, breath shaking. Rowan knelt beside her, voice gentle again. "You're safe. I promise." But Leah stared at the door, heart pounding. Because nothing about Grant's last words felt empty, and somewhere inside her, she knew. The war had officially begun. Grant Hollowell stormed out of Rowan's loft like a man escaping a burning building, except the flames were inside him. Rage, humiliation, fear, all boiling into something reckless. He didn't return home. He couldn't sit still. Instead, he drove straight to Sterling and Crane, intent on reclaiming control of the one thing he believed was still his: power. But by the time he stepped through the office doors, power had already slipped from his hands. The air shifted when he walked in. Conversations halted. People stepped aside. Phones lowered. Grant had always enjoyed attention, but this wasn't admiration. It was anticipation. A crowd watching a man they knew was about to fall. Mara, his assistant, rushed toward him, pale and frantic. "Grant, don't go in there. They're reviewing," but he shoved past her. "I don't care." He pushed open the boardroom doors. Every executive looked up, faces carved in stone. Roland Crane stood at the far end of the table, a folder in hand. A very thick folder. "Good," Grant snapped. "You're all here. We need to talk about the rumors." Crane cut him off. "Sit down, Hollowell." Grant froze. No one spoke to him like that. He didn't sit. Crane opened the folder. "We received a whistleblower complaint 3 weeks ago. We kept it internal while verifying the details." "Complaints?" Grant scoffed. "About what?" "The misuse of company funds," Crane said calmly. "Your misuse." The room erupted into whispers. Grant's stomach dropped. "No, that's impossible. This is fabricated. Who started this?" Crane slid a stack of documents toward him. Receipts, wire transfers, personal charges disguised as corporate expenses, all with his signature. All undeniable. "This is a violation of federal compliance," Crane continued. "Effective immediately, you are suspended pending investigation." Grant's throat tightened. "You can't do this. You need me." "My promotion." "Your promotion," Crane said flatly, "was rescinded this morning." Silence detonated across the room. But the final blow came not from Crane, but from Sloane, who slipped into the doorway at that exact moment. Her expression was cold, controlled. "We also have confirmation," she said softly, "that your wife has left you. And she may be speaking with the media soon." Grant turned white. He knew instantly who stood behind that leak. 2-0. "Rowan." His voice cracked. You're all making a mistake." Crane shook his head. "No, Grant, you did." Security arrived to escort him out. Phones recorded. Whispering spread. Doors opened to watch him fall. For the first time in his life, Grant Hollowell felt small, stripped, powerless. And as he was led through the lobby, someone murmured just loud enough for him to hear. "Leah made the right choice. I am." The day Grant Hollowell was escorted out of Sterling and Crane was the same day Leah finally stopped looking over her shoulder. For weeks she had lived with the fear that he would come for her, twist the truth, or try to rip her future apart. But now, the man who once controlled every inch of her life had lost the one thing he valued more than her: his power. News traveled fast across Manhattan. By noon, 3 financial outlets reported his suspension. By evening, 2 major media networks owned quietly by Hale Media Group ran stories exposing his financial misconduct and inappropriate workplace relationships. Not one mentioned Leah. Rowan had made sure of it. When he arrived back at the loft that night, she was waiting by the windows, watching the honey-gold sunset fall over the skyline. She didn't look frightened anymore. She didn't look broken. She looked free. Rowan stepped beside her. "It's done," he said softly. "He can't hurt you anymore." Leah exhaled shakily, tears forming not from sadness, but release. "I thought I'd feel guilty watching his life fall apart, but I don't." "You shouldn't," Rowan replied. "Actions have consequences. He earned his." She nodded, hand resting gently on her belly. "What happens now?" Rowan hesitated, not from uncertainty, but out of respect. "Now, you decide the life you want. I'm here if you want me in it, but this future is yours, Leah. No one will own your choices again." Her eyes softened. "You've protected me more in weeks than he did in years." "I didn't protect you," Rowan corrected gently. "You protected yourself. I just made sure the world couldn't silence you again." The baby kicked, then strong, certain, as if agreeing. Leah laughed through her tears, placing Rowan's hand on her stomach. He froze, overwhelmed by something deep and unspoken. Later that month, Leah moved into her own apartment in Tribeca, a space filled with sunlight and canvases and the soft sound of future possibilities. She continued painting. Her first piece sold within days. Her second sold for enough to support her and her child for months. A collector requested a series. Another gallery invited her to exhibit. Her life wasn't rebuilt overnight, but it was hers now. When her son was born, Rowan was there calm, steady, holding her hand as she brought new life into the world. Leah named the baby Elias Rowan Whitmore Hale, a symbol of past pain, present strength, and a future finally filled with hope. And as she held her newborn close, she whispered a truth she finally believed with her whole heart. We're safe now, we're free, and we're home. The chapter ended not with fear, but with peace. Not with loss, but with rebirth. A closed door. A new beginning. A life reclaimed. All right, my wonderful friends. So this is where our story gently closes its final chapter. And if you are still here with me right now, still listening, still feeling, then something in Leah's journey must have touched your heart in a way you didn't expect. Maybe it reminded you of your own strength. Maybe it reminded you of something you once survived. Or maybe it simply reminded you that you deserve peace too. You know, the Stoics often said, the impediment to action advances action. What stands in the way becomes the way. And that's exactly what Leah showed us. The things that tried to break her betrayal, fear, loneliness became the very path that led her to freedom, dignity, and a new beginning. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "You have power over your mind, not outside events." Leah learned that, and in time, all of us must learn it too. So, as we step away from this story together, let me speak to you directly, heart to heart. You are stronger than the storms you've walked through. Your past does not define your future, and the moment you decide to choose yourself, truly choose yourself, everything changes. If this story reached you, even a little, if it made you breathe deeper, if it made you believe again in healing, justice, or second chances, then please, like this video, share it with someone who needs it, and subscribe to the channel so we can keep walking through these powerful stories together. You being here means more than you know. And remember, your new beginning might be closer than you think.